We have been looking at wisdom and foolishness from the book of Proverbs, and a big part of making use of wisdom or in preventing foolishness is learning how to properly use our mouths. It has been said, it is better to be silent and thought a fool than to speak up and remove all doubt. Now, that statement isn't actually in the Bible. I mean, it's close to something in the Bible. In fact, it's very similar to Proverbs 17:28, which says, "Even a fool is considered wise when he keeps silent, discerning when he seals his lips." And so, yes, a fool can pass for a wise person if they keep quiet. Why is that? Because your words have the power to reveal what's in your heart. What's inside you comes out through your mouth. That's a biblical principle we see. In fact, Proverbs 18:4, we read, "The words of a person's mouth are deep waters, a flowing river, a fountain of wisdom." Or Jesus said in Matthew 12:34, back into the verse, "For the mouth speaks from the overflow of the heart." Our words reveal what's in our heart, whether good or bad, whether wise or foolish. People don't see your heart, they hear it. So if you can control your mouth, then you can control how much of your heart the people around you can hear. Control your mouth, you'll control what people think of you. In the Bible, we see that words can be very powerful. A few weeks back, we were looking at the wicked tongue. We're going to be seeing a different aspect today, but we were looking at that a couple weeks back. And we saw this as Proverbs 18:21 says, "Death and life are in the power of the tongue, but those who love it will eat its fruit." That's true for a wicked tongue, but it's also true for a wise tongue or a foolish tongue. There is power in the tongue, not just for death and evil, but also for life and for good. This is why we need to master the use of our mouths, so that we will use our words wisely and for good. You know, we just heard about proclaiming the gospel. Well, that's a good use of your mouth. We should be using our mouths for good. Now, if you love your mouth, then you will eat the fruit of its labor. The most obvious thing to that is, keep your mouth shut so you won't have to eat the bitter fruits that it causes. You don't want the trouble, so keep your mouth shut. However, it would be also true that if you love to use your mouth wisely and for good, then you will enjoy the fruits of your good speech. It can also be the positive, not just the negative. There's a great deal of good in using the right words and using them at the right time. Now, here's just some thoughts from the book of Proverbs. We'll go through a couple verses here. Proverbs 16:24. "Pleasant words are a honeycomb, sweet to the taste and health to the body." Proverbs 20:15. "There is gold and a multitude of jewels, but knowledgeable lips are a rare treasure." Proverbs 16:21. "Anyone with a wise heart is called discerning, and pleasant speech increases learning." Proverbs 25:11. "A word spoken at the right time is like gold apples in silver settings." Proverbs 15:23. "A person takes joy in giving an answer, and a timely word, how good it is." Proverbs 25:25. "Good news from a distant land is like cold water to a parched throat." Now, anyone here understands, anyone from the Phoenix area who's just survived the summer should understand the value of cold water to a parched throat, In fact, we're just getting to that time of year where the water's going to start being cold again. I mean, you have that at your house where, there's two faucets and it's hot and hotter. Is that the, you know what I'm saying? Okay. Well, I like this time of the year where it's a choice between hot and cold. Okay. That's my preference. But that's what good news is like. Good news is like in a world full of bad news. When you finally get a good word, it's refreshing. And you like to hear good news from somewhere else. Don't watch TV news, you won't get it, okay? But we like to hear good news. Wise words, knowledgeable words, the right words spoken at the right time are a good thing. It's a good thing. They are a rare treasure that brings health. They bring blessing and encouragement. So it is important for us to learn to control our mouths to master that so we can cause our words to be used for the right purpose. Now, another phrase that's not in the Bible, but could possibly fit in here is, if you can't say something nice, then don't say anything at all. To quote a bunny rabbit in a movie. Yes, Bambi's the one that made that phrase, and it was actually Thumper in the movie. But now, there is a time and a place for words of correction, and that is not always pleasant. But the wise person has learned to silence their words until the right moment. Timing's everything. The right moment. And also to say them the right way, so that their words will be used for good. Now, this isn't just a Proverbs concept. I mean, we see these concepts in Proverbs, but here's a couple from the New Testament. This is James 1:26. James says, if anyone thinks he is religious without controlling his tongue, his religion is useless, and he deceives himself. Colossians 4:6, let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you should answer each person. If you want to please God, you must learn to control your tongue. We are called to learn how to speak graciously, to have seasoning, so we will always know how to answer each person wisely, each person at the right time and in the right way. One reason we should do this, and we've already alluded to this, is because our words reveal the level of wisdom or foolishness in our heart. If you don't want people to think you're a fool, or if you don't want them to know that you're a fool, then watch what you say. Guaranteed way to help your image. Proverbs 16:23, we read this. It says, the heart of a wise person instructs his mouth. It adds learning to his speech. Proverbs 15:7, the lips of the wise broadcast knowledge, but it is not so the heart of fools. Proverbs 15:2, the tongue of the wise make knowledge attractive, but the mouth of fools blurts out foolishness. You can tell a lot about a person by what they say and how they say it. The wise person's lips give knowledge and instruction. The fool does not, because he doesn't have knowledge and instruction. The wise person knows how to use pleasant words to accomplish their task. On the other hand, the fool just blurts out foolishness. Their words reveal the foolishness that is in their heart. Because of this dynamic, the wise person will guard their mouth so that they only speak in a way that shares knowledge and makes that knowledge attractive. It's not just what you say, it's also how you say it. The fool will not guard their mouth, and as a result speaks to their own harm. Now, there are great benefits in mastering the use of the mouth, using the power of words in a wise manner. But there also are consequences if we fail to do so, if we use our mouths foolishly. Proverbs 10:14, we read this, says, the wise store up knowledge, but the mouth of the fool hastens destruction. Proverbs 18:6 and 7, a fool's lips lead to strife, and his mouth provokes a beating. A fool's mouth is his devastation, and his lips are the trap for his life. The fool is the opposite of the wise person. Instead of learning how to use their words wisely, instead of learning to speak at the proper time and the proper way, their words actually become a trap that seals their fate in destruction. They stir up trouble with their words, and the result of that is they face the trouble they incite. That's part of what a fool does. This is why you don't want to speak rashly or quickly. You always want to think through what you're saying. Now, Charles Spurgeon put it this way. He said, beware of letting your tongue outrun your brains. That's good advice. Or in Proverbs 12:18, we read it this way, there is one who speaks rashly like a piercing sword, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. See, the fool just blurts out their foolishness. They have no filter. And if it runs through their mind, it must flow through their mouth. As a result, their tongue becomes like a piercing sword, It's suddenly slashing and stabbing without notice. The wise person is the opposite. They don't speak until they have thought through their words. Think before you speak. Now, that may not take long. It doesn't always take long, or it may take quite a while, but the wise person is willing to take the time, whether long or short. They're willing to take the time to find the right words, to learn the right way of speaking. As a result, their tongue brings healing. The opposite of the fool. The tongue of the fool wounds and does harm. The tongue of the wise brings healing. You always want to choose your words carefully. And that's a good plan. Always choose your words carefully. You never want to choose them out of anger, but in consideration of what your response of your words will create. Proverbs 15:1, we read this. It says, "A gentle answer turns away anger, but a harsh word stirs up wrath." Your words can create a hostile environment, but they also can be used to de-escalate a situation where there are hostile feelings. Now, if you're in a tense situation and people are getting angry and people are on edge, I'm going to tell you, speaking kind and gentle words will likely help de-escalate the situation. Soft answer turns away wrath, turns away anger. On the other hand, speaking harsh and angry words can turn a celebration into a fight. You just try some harsh, angry words at Thanksgiving dinner. See if that doesn't, okay. The words you choose have consequences. Now, back when I was in school, a long, long time ago, they talked about how this works in relation to the human brain. It was in one of the classes I got to take. And in a tense situation, what happens is the lower regions of the brain tend to take over, which is where you have your fight or flight instincts. In a tense situation, when there's danger, when you sense danger, you have this tendency to respond. The immediate response is usually fight or flight. When there's a problem, that's our first natural reaction. And it depends on your personality and your experience as to whether you try to run from trouble or whether you try to counterattack whatever the difficulty is. The fool acts without thinking and is almost always trapped in one of these two responses. They run when they don't need to, or they try and pick a fight when they shouldn't. The wise person thinks through the matter before responding, which causes them to transfer the decision making into a higher region of the brain, a higher brain function. And we're taught, actually in school, we were taught this is why police, when they're trying to de-escalate a situation, will ask cognitive questions. Why? They're trying to get the person they're talking to move out of the fight or flight spot of the brain and up into the higher cognitive functions. The answers really may not even matter, but they want them to think. They want them to stop reacting emotionally and start thinking. And so they ask questions to generate that thought process. Well, same works for us. Sometimes you've got to stop and think before you speak. That's the difference between a wise person and a fool. They're moving it from the lower brain function to the higher brain function. Someone has a gun and maybe even shot someone. Maybe you've seen this with police, but the police are talking calmly and asking them questions. Why? Because a gentle word turns away anger. Sometimes they can talk down even a violent person, an angry person, if they ask questions, if they talk to them. They have to switch what part of the brain that person's thinking in. So how can we use our mouths wisely? I wanted to give you several things from what we see in Proverbs, and I've given you kind of the overview of the way we should use the mouth and the value of that and why we should do it. But there are some specific things we can find on how to use our mouths wisely from Proverbs. And if you follow any of these instructions, okay, I'm just going to give you several this morning, but if you follow any of these instructions, I will suggest you will get almost immediate increase in your wisdom points on your character sheet. Okay? Charles got it. Okay. Yes, this will increase your wisdom, okay? Almost instantly, guaranteed. First one is this: learn to control what you say. Learn to control what you say. Proverbs 13:3, we read this: the one who guards his mouth protects his life. The one who opens his lips invites his own ruin. Proverbs 21:23, The one who guards his mouth and tongue keeps himself out of trouble. Learn to control what you say. Control your tongue. You must learn to control the words that come out of your mouth. If you can't keep your mouth shut, then your tongue will control you and it will cause trouble. If you will guard your mouth, keeping it from saying everything you think, not saying anything until you have thought it through, then you will keep yourselves out of a lot of trouble. It's that simple. Shut the mouth. You know, it's interesting. We spend the first couple of years of our life learning how to speak, and the rest of our lives learning when not to speak. Seems to be a dynamic. You don't have to be wise for people to think you're wise. You just have to be quiet. Running off at the mouth is usually the area where we bring ourselves the most trouble in our lives, and also where we quickly express our foolishness. The next thing goes hand in hand with that concept, and that is this: don't answer anything until you've heard the whole question and all the facts. Don't answer anything until you've heard the whole question, until you know all the facts. Proverbs 18:13, the one who gives an answer before he listens, this is foolishness and a disgrace for him. Proverbs 29:20, do you see someone who speaks too soon? There is more hope for a fool than for him. This is one of those, at the very end of the fool. The quick answer is usually the wrong answer. Now, this proverb kind of made me think back to watching the Family Feud, when I was a kid. Maybe you've been there where, you got to stay home sick. You were sick and you stayed home from school and you're watching the game shows, laying on the couch and watching that on TV. And the host would read a question, and the contestants, there's two contestants, one on each side, and they got a buzzer. And whoever hits the buzzer first gets to answer the question. However, a very common thing you saw in the show, a common problem, was people would hit the buzzer before he had finished the question. And then they had to give their answer based on what he had said up to the point of the buzzer. He would not finish the question. They had to answer. And if he had barely even started anything, it was sometimes their answers were just ridiculous. They had no answer because they hadn't heard the question. Well, that's what this is talking about. The person who's answering before they've heard the question. The people who are on that game show are playing for games, but I'll tell you, in life, you're playing for even higher stakes. So you ought to hear the question before you take the answer, before you try and answer. A person who gives their answer before they've heard the question is a fool. So the person who gives their statement on a matter before they've heard all the facts, that's also a fool. Don't be in a hurry to form an opinion about things, but take the time to get all the information before you make a statement, before you give an answer. Make sure you know your facts. Hear the full question. This is one of the ways that people struggle with this, is they often begin to formulate their answer in their mind when they're having a discussion with someone, rather than listening to what the other person is saying. So you can be having an argument or a discussion with someone, and that person may not be listening to anything you're saying. They're just thinking of their own arguments to respond. People do this. They aren't listening to the other person. They're just thinking of what to say next. That is foolish, because it will only lead to miscommunication, misunderstandings, and escalate what is already a difficult situation. If you have no interest in an honest conversation that involves two people discussing the facts of the matter, or if you're too angry to have an honest conversation, then you're better off not talking. Go be silent until you can have an honest conversation. Wait till you know the facts before you formulate your answer and before you speak, and you will massively improve your level of wisdom, or decrease your level of foolishness, however you want to, put that balance. Another thing that will make our speech wiser and help us avoid foolishness is this: don't make promises you can't keep, and don't talk about things you can't control. Don't make promises you can't keep, and don't talk about things you can't control. Proverbs 27:1, we read this. It says, don't boast about tomorrow, for you don't know what a day will bring. Talk about to talk about things that are not in your power, that are not in your control, as though they were certain, as though they were absolute, is foolish at best. Maybe even blasphemous at worst. In fact, in James, we read this. This is James 4, chapter 4, beginning in verse 13. Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will travel to such and such city and spend a year there and do business and make a profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring, what your life will be. For you are like a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you should say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. But as it is, you boast in your arrogance. Such boasting is evil. We should never act as though our plans are absolute. In fact, I've heard it said the best way to make God laugh, tell him your plans. Okay, well, he's got his own plans. To act as though our plans are absolute only traps us in our foolishness. Reality is that events of society often, and events in our life, are not under our control. I mean, I don't know about you, my last week didn't go the way I planned it. Did your week go the way you planned it? The world go the way you planned it this week? No, it's not under our control. So we should acknowledge that reality in how we speak. It will give us wisdom. We will be wiser if we acknowledge this reality. See, if you'll do it, wisely recognizing only God can control tomorrow, only God knows what tomorrow holds because God's the one who holds tomorrow. And if you will allow that to be a pattern in your speech, it will protect you from making promises you can't keep. And it will protect you from foolishly saying things you can't guarantee. In your talking, understand this, in speaking with others, an ounce of humility will lead to a pound of wisdom. Be humble. You'll be wiser. Right along with this concept, we see this, and the other thing that we should do is don't brag or build yourself up with your own words. Don't brag or build yourself up with your own words. Proverbs 27:2 says this, let another praise you and not your own mouth, a stranger and not your own lips. The wise person practices humility. It's not that they don't value being praised or enjoy accolades, but they know that praise is only valuable when it comes from someone else. It has no true value if you give it to yourself. Maybe you've heard it this way, don't toot your own horn. See, bragging about yourself only makes people think less of you. The more you go around telling people how wonderful you are, the less they'll like you. That's reality. I've been watching Leave It to Beaver. You know, the villain of the show, Eddie Haskell, he's always walking around telling people how wonderful he is and how great he is. Nobody believes it. Well, they're not going to believe us either if we go around doing that, behave like that. See, bragging about yourself only makes people think less of you. If you want people to think more of you, let other people do the bragging because your actions deserve it. Because your behavior deserves it. And finally, if you want to master your mouth and use your words wisely, you must understand the power of your words. Words are powerful. You need to understand the power of your words. Proverbs 18:20 says this, from the fruit of a person's mouth, his stomach is satisfied, and he is filled with the product of his lips. You know, your words will determine the course of your life. You will receive the result of what you say. It'll set the tone. If you tell your boss what you really think of him, you're likely to be unemployed tomorrow. Okay? You'll get the results of your words. And actually, I suspect we've seen this dynamic in the news this week. There was a young man who was murdered because of his political beliefs and his religious beliefs, and we saw people publicly celebrating that murder, celebrating it. And the result of many of them is the loss of their jobs. They've lost their jobs because they're publicly celebrating murder. Now, This isn't about politics. This isn't about religion. If you're publicly celebrating the cold-blooded murder of anyone, of any political persuasion, of any religious persuasion, if you're celebrating murder, you got a heart problem. And when people see that, they're not going to want you working for them. What's happening to those people? Well, they are getting the fruit of their lips. Their lives are being filled with the product of their lips. What they said is coming back to them. We also need to be aware, that the power of our words has that effect, but we also need to be aware of how it can affect other people. Other people, not just us. Proverbs 25:15 says this. It says, "A ruler can be persuaded through patience, and a gentle tongue can break a bone." We all know that harsh words can be painful, but the reality is that gentle words spoken at the right time can also have a massive impact. Gentle words can have impact, can have an impact on society and on individuals. The right words spoken to a ruler can change the course of a nation. And so the wise man who has the ruler's ear and speaks at the right time can have great impact. And yes, I'll tell you, gentle words can hurt if spoken the right way at the right time. But some hurts can be healing. You know, I don't know if you've ever been to the doctor and what they did hurt, but it helped. Well, sometimes it goes that way. Some hurt wounds can be healing. The more careful you choose your words, the more likely they are to have a powerful impact. Now, because of this, we must never take our words for granted or use them lightly. Never take your words for granted or use them lightly. They matter. Proverbs chapter 26, verse 18 and 19, we read, "Like a madman who throws flaming darts and deadly arrows, so is the person who deceives his neighbor and says, 'I was only joking.'" Their word doesn't mean anything. People often use their words thinking it won't mean anything, that it'll be humorous, it'll be funny, without thinking consideration of how other people will be affected by their words. And I'm going to tell you, that can be a dangerous pastime and cause a great deal of anger toward you. It can hurt them, but it can hurt you back. Now, some of you who know me a little better know I like a good joke. I know some of you are surprised at that, but I enjoy humor. You know, laughter is good medicine. That's biblical. That's a different sermon. We'll look at that later another day. But laughter is good medicine. But I have learned the hard way, not everyone knows how to take a joke. Okay? So you do have to be careful who you joke with. You have to think through what you're saying. I've come up with 2 rules that keep me out of trouble, which, what we're just going to read here in Proverbs. First one is this: if anyone's going to go get hurt, it's not a joke. If anyone's going to get hurt, it's not a joke. You need to think through your joke, your humor, and make sure it won't hurt anyone. If it will, it's not funny. Good, healthy jokes bring laughter, not pain. And I'm not talking about people just groaning because it was a dad joke. That's not the kind of pain I'm talking. Okay, that's a different kind of pain. I'm talking about someone being physically or emotionally hurt, damaged because of your humor. Well, when that happens, it's not funny. So you need to think it through before you speak. Is this going to hurt someone? But the second is what we just read in Proverbs. If you have to say, "I was only joking," when it's over, it wasn't a good joke. People often do evil things to excuse it as a joke. They'll pass it off that way, or when they get caught, or when they're embarrassed. "Well, I was just kidding." Those people are fools. However, even if you meant it as a joke, even if that was your genuine intention, if you have to explain that it was a joke, then it wasn't funny. And yes, I've had jokes I had to explain they weren't funny. Okay, nobody laughed. It wasn't funny. But that's a good rule for jokes. If you have to explain it, it's not funny. So the minute you catch yourself saying, "Well, I was just kidding," you're falling into this. You're not valuing your words highly enough. Protect yourself. Guard your mouth. Value your words. Think before you speak. Those are the things a wise person does so that he will not fall into this trap. Now, because our words are powerful, we must learn to always tell the truth. This is another aspect of our words being powerful. We recognize they are powerful, so we take them serious. We tell the truth. We will be gracious, but we will be honest. Proverbs 28:23 says this, "The one who rebukes a person will later find more favor than the one who flatters with his tongue." See, in the end, a wise person knows that the truth is more important than flattery. A person will value what you say if they know you will always tell them the truth, even when it hurts. You always tell the truth. But if people know you will lie to save their feelings, then they will never completely be able to trust you. The wise person is gracious in their speech. They take the time to learn how to say things properly. We'll look at that in a moment. They'll say things as nicely as they can, but they will not lie. They will tell the truth. The wise person will speak hard truths when that is what needs to be said. And sometimes it does. Sometimes a gentle tongue has to break bone. Finally, because our words are powerful and the wise person takes the time and puts forth the effort, because they know it's powerful, they'll take the time, put forth the effort to learn to speak better. They'll put forth the effort to learn to speak better. Proverbs chapter 27, verse 21. "As a crucible refines silver and a smelter refines gold, so a person should refine his praise." You should refine your praise. Refine how you say things so that they are more positive. Now, you can almost always find a positive way and a negative way to say just about anything. Okay? I mean, that's a reality. There's almost always a positive or negative anything. So when you can, try the more positive. I'm not saying be dishonest, always tell the truth, but always say it in the most gracious way you can, while it's still being true. The more you learn to speak well, the more you learn to master your mouth, the more your speech will make wise use of your words. Applying any of these principles that we see in Proverbs will make you seem wiser. And in fact, I would suggest they will make you wiser. Now, there is one more consideration we should take into account because Proverbs gives us a lot of characteristics. It shows us the value of our words. It shows us the importance, the consequences. It shows us how we can speak wisely through the mouth. And all of it really in Proverbs does come down to controlling the mouth. But there is one more consideration that'll make a world of difference in your speech, but it also change your eternal destination. And that is giving your heart to Jesus. And I say that because what we have seen is that at the very beginning of this, our speech reveals what is in our hearts. When we're speaking, it is an overflow from what is in our hearts. Now, yes, you can control the dam. You can control the floodgates so that what's in your heart is not gushing out instantly. But I'm going to tell you, the better solution is fix the heart. Change the heart. This happens when you surrender yourself to Christ. He comes into your life. He can change your thoughts, your attitudes. He can take the evil that is in your heart and turn it into good. He can take your foolishness and turn it into wisdom. He can change you from the inside out so you don't have foolishness to gust out of your mouth. And so, yes, we want to control our mouth. That's important. That is part of what we see here in Proverbs. We must master the mouth. We must learn to use words wisely. But I'm going to tell you, the best place to start if you want true wisdom and spiritual power is you come to Jesus. And you let Him transform you from the inside out. Because when you have a new heart, then you can have new words. They'll flow out of your mouth. So you come to Jesus. Thank you for watching this video. If you live in the greater Phoenix area, we would love to have you come and worship with us in person any Sunday morning at 9:30 a.m. The Meadows Baptist Church is located at 3701 West Beardsley Road. That's the side road of the 101 just west of 35th Avenue. We would love to have you pop by as we celebrate Jesus together.